From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Bursell. I was thinking the other day, when I was a young man, sort of trying to find my way in regard to politics and philosophy, just by nature, I thought about these things. That was just who I was. It wasn't a decision. It's just what I did. Okay, so I'm trying to make sense of things. I was trying to fashion my thoughts in a way that would be useful to other people and hopefully entertaining as well. Well, one of the issues I faced really early was I was afraid of going with the crowd. I felt that it was necessary that I think independently and freely. And so for quite a while, whatever was the most popular opinion, say a candidate was the front runner, well, I automatically had to be against that candidate in my mind. I think this was more of a subconscious process than anything. I don't think I really thought about it until I started to realize what I was doing. If everybody had, whatever the fashion was, if everybody had short hair, well, I had to have long hair, or just the opposite. Now everybody has long hair all of a sudden. I've got to have short hair. I just felt this need. I was so, I don't know. I guess it's a matter of security versus insecurity. I was so insecure that I felt the need to demonstrate that I was secure by being different. I was thinking about this because I'm really seeing a lot of this lately. Being against the crowd. Being a free thinker. Well, as I've learned through my hard experience, just being automatically against something that's popular, just being automatically against the crowd, that does not make you an independent thinker. The process that I've tried to take over the years, especially since sort of discovering this personality flaw, this intellectual flaw in myself, you just got to go with best evidence. I mean, yeah, trusting your gut, your feelings, there's an element of that. You have to listen to that. It can't be the only word. I'm sorry. It can't be your only source by which you decide truth versus fiction. And of course, there are important things to decide. Now, I'm not going to enter into personal relationships or, your career choices or things like that. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the decisions we have to make as members of a shared society. We got to live together. We got to get along. And a lot of times you can just do whatever the hell you want. It doesn't affect anybody else. That's great. That's fine. That's where I'm a big old libertarian. That's great. But there are some decisions we make that affect other people. I mean, God, through the whole pandemic, whether or not to mask or social distance or get a vaccine was a matter of public health, not your own personal private decisions. There are things that impact other people, the way you vote, the way you understand your role in the world regarding climate crisis, whether it's your personal decisions or the political decisions you make. So I'm talking about the way we interact with the world as it impacts others. If it's just you, you know what? More power to you. I am libertarian in that sense. But when it affects other people and when we're talking about issues that will bring harm or good to all of us, we got to give this some thought. So yeah, just a little reminder here, a little friendly reminder from somebody who's gone down this road. If your guiding principle is, I don't follow the crowd, well, that's just stupid. It doesn't make any sense. Sometimes the crowd might be right. Sometimes they're wrong. You don't know until you get into this thing. And I might add, if you're one of those people who says, I don't follow the crowd, and you wear that as a badge of honor, and you just consider the crowd always wrong, guess what? You know what? You're still part of a crowd. It's just a smaller crowd. But there's still a crowd. But that's all. Just don't take that as your sort of credo. I don't follow the crowd. I'm an independent thinker. That's just BS unless you're actually examining the best evidence. Now, all right, what's best evidence? This is something else that came up during the pandemic, and I think it's universal. It goes beyond that, but it's been, I think, best illustrated through the whole mask and vaccine debates, so-called. You just got to go by best evidence. Now, that doesn't mean that I do my own research, quote unquote. I mean, it does, but find another word for it. Now, I'm to be honest, I'm completely bored with this conversation, so this isn't going to be long. You're not doing research. You're Googling. People who do research dedicate their lives. They go 8 years to school and then 8 years in an internship, and they study and they write books, and all of their sources are checked and double-checked and triple-checked, and they're peer-reviewed, and they write papers, and they're criticized, and they change their theses, and okay, it's a discipline. It's a real actual thing. You have absolutely no idea the difference between actual research and what you're doing. It's like the width of the universe versus your mom's basement. I mean, it's just not the same thing. So don't tell me you're doing your own research. But, I mean, the language is sort of similar, so I don't want to get confusing. You do have to basically decide who you're going to believe, right? I'm not a scientist. I'm not a virologist. I'm not a lot of things. In fact, I'm not most things. I'm not an expert in hardly anything. But what I do, I am certainly capable of deciding which experts I'm going to listen to, and that's where I go to best evidence. As a civilian, so to speak, I'm capable of looking at the field. Who's got financial interest in this? Is there a consensus among scientists, reputable journalists? And there's plenty of reputable news outlets. You really can, if you take some time and effort, and it doesn't take that much, you can figure out who's more likely telling the truth. If you can't, let's set something on the table right now. I'm basically a skeptic. I can't be certain about anything. I don't pretend to be certain about I don't know if the sky is blue. I can't be certain about anything. But I do know that we have to act on best evidence. So every single one of us, regardless of our expertise or our lack of expertise, we can do those simple things. And we can decide who we're going to believe, who we're going to mistrust, who we're going to trust. It's really not that complicated. And you can never be sure. You just got to, at any given time, all right, what's the best evidence? I'm not going to automatically go with the majority. In fact, there are a lot of places where I don't. Many places where I don't. But this appeal to authority. Okay. And this really gets to the point of what we're talking about today. On the list of logical fallacies, and there are many, one of the big ones is appeal to authority. Well, it must be right because, the FDA says it's right. That's my authority. All right, yes, that's a logical fallacy. But it's not a logical fallacy to scan all the material. Again, as a non-expert, there's absolutely nothing wrong with finding, all the experts seem to have a consensus over here. I'm going to go with that. I don't have any good evidence to go otherwise. And this is a matter of public health. So yeah, I'm going to go there. That's not a logical fallacy. That's not an appeal to authority. That's just doing what you're supposed to do. Looking at the evidence, making a decision, and then being a responsible person living in a society. Today we seem to have the exact opposite of that. There's the appeal against authority. Like I started this. Well, the authorities say, the so-called authorities tell us we have to do this, so they must be wrong. Just simply for the fact that they are the authority. Well, that's exactly the same logical fallacy, just turned on its head. It's still a logical fallacy. I'm automatically not going to believe someone just because they're an authority? That idea is just running rampant through this country. Well, they're an authority, so I'm not going to believe them. There's another logical fallacy referred to as the bandwagon. And that's very simple. Everybody seems to believe it. It's a popular opinion. And we're not talking about authorities now. We're talking about all of your peers, all of the rest of everybody in the country. Oh, they all seem to be jumping on this idea. So I'll jump on too. Well, that's a logical fallacy. You're believing something just because it's popular. But just like the appeal to authority, there's a flip of the bandwagon as well. It's just the exact opposite. Everybody else is jumping on that bandwagon, so I won't. That's the only reason for me taking a particular opinion. Everybody seems to be jumping on this vaccine bandwagon, so not me. That's another logical fallacy. Appeal to tradition, very closely related to that. There again, well, it's always been done this way, so I'll do it this way. That's a logical fallacy. That's not a reason to make a decision, just because it's always been done this way. But there's the exact opposite problem for each one of these fallacies. Just because something is a tradition doesn't automatically make it wrong either. Have I made my point here? Okay, so where do we go from here? People taking great pride in their so-called independent thinking. And of course, in these days of social media, many of us are sharing these great words of wisdom. Oh, but that can be very problematic. That can be very problematic. I saw one that said, "When is the common sense variant going to start spreading?" Of course, referring to the couple of variants of the COVID virus. When is the common sense variant going to start spreading? All right, so what the hell does that mean? I don't know. It could mean that could be from an anti-vaxxer. It could be from a proponent of the vaccine. Nobody has any way of knowing. Whoever shared this, I can't understand what their goal is here. When is the common sense variant going to start spreading? I don't know what that means. It could mean anything. Anybody from any side could take that as their own. The other thing about posts you'll see in social media, quotes, so many quotes. And of course, the most misquoted people of all time, Mark Twain comes to mind. If you see a Mark Twain quote, the chances are really good it's not his quote. He's almost misquoted more than he's quoted in social media. And one of the problems, even if they're correct, is the quotes are taken out of context, just by the very nature of social media. Everything's in a little tweet form or a little meme form. It's just a short excerpt. I'll give you an example. Here's one. It's from Albert Camus, the writer and philosopher. "The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion." Okay, now, I said that with a little bit of a mocking tone because I love Albert Camus, but as an excerpt in social media, it means nothing. Again, like the earlier one about common sense, this could have been shared by a raging liberal progressive. It could have been shared by a raging right-winger libertarian. Who knows? There's no way of knowing. If you found this quote, wherever Camus wrote it, there are paragraphs and pages and chapters probably before the quote and more paragraphs and pages and chapters after the quote, putting it into context and making it a valuable thing to read. But as an excerpt, it's useless because all it does is it confirms the bias of the reader, regardless of the reader's bias. Again, could be right-wing, could be left-wing, could be centrist, could be anything. Not to mention how many people who read this share it. How many even know who Albert Camus is? They never read The Stranger. They never read The Myth of Sisyphus. They don't know. They probably think it's Al Camus. You know, that famous picture of him with the with the cigarette butt hanging out of his mouth. It looks like any doofus from Brooklyn in the 40s. Yeah, it's Al Camus. People don't know. Here's another example. Carl Jung, or should I say Carl Jung. Here it is. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. All right, Carl Jung, there again. That little excerpt there was preceded by chapters and followed by chapters, and put into context will help you understand what he's saying. But this damn excerpt tells you exactly zero. You're only going to glom on with your own predisposed ideas and your little homespun philosophies, and you're going to agree, and you're going to feel all smart because you quoted Carl Jung. Cut it out. Just you guys, we are drifting into this dull, mediocre, basic dumbness. Oh, I'm just so worried. I'm just so worried about us. We need help thinking. And I don't want you to take that as an insult. We all need help thinking. If I were king of the world, or at least if I had the ability to decide what children would learn in school, the single most important thing they would learn from pre-K right on through college, critical thinking, how to think, how to process information. Everybody should know the logical fallacies just like they know the alphabet. Speaking of social media posts, saw a great one I'm going to share with you right now. From a guy named Peter Boland, who's a professor of philosophy at Southwest College. I forget. It's Southwest or Northwest or Northeast or South-North. It's a two-direction college. I looked him up. I looked at his website. He seemed like a pretty reasonable guy. But this is his quote. I'm going to read it to you. I'm a college philosophy professor. We don't teach socialism or even liberal political values. We teach critical thinking, evidence-based truth-seeking, global awareness, empathy, curiosity, and humility. DeSantis, referring to Governor DeSantis of Florida, I guess, DeSantis and others on the right face an enormous obstacle. Reality itself skews left. When people become more educated, they become more acutely aware of the suffering of others and of their own moral responsibility to do something about it. Me-first ideologies wither in the light of wisdom. Peter Boland. Yeah, I absolutely align myself with that post. That's exactly right. And he says exactly what I was saying earlier, evidence-based truth-seeking. We can't all be experts. It's virtually impossible. And no, we don't want to follow the logical fallacy of believing somebody just because they're an expert. It's not an appeal to authority. We don't want to do that. But at any given moment of any given day, we have to look at the best evidence we can find and make a decision. All right? That's where I'm going. And as science proves on a daily basis, and it's really frustrating some people, sometimes the evidence changes. And therefore the recommendations have to change. Oh, people just, their heads explode over that. So yeah, evidence-based truth-seeking. And then what he closes with is the toughest part of all. Understanding our moral responsibility to do something about the suffering of others. That's not a given with an awful lot of people. Somehow we've got to convince folks. And again, as Professor Boland points out, an education that teaches critical thinking, evidence-based truth-seeking, global awareness, empathy, curiosity, humility, will, I think, in most cases, if you're a living, breathing, warm-blooded person, I think it will spring forward some empathy, some feelings of responsibility. If you know all these things, if you're aware of the suffering. I mean, it's easy to point out just small examples. I always talk about the bubbles we live in. If you live in a small bubble in a small white town or a small white neighborhood and you really even know any people of color, it's going to change how you think about the world and your role in it. As opposed to if you live in a diverse neighborhood, if you interact regularly with people outside your bubble, it's going to change how you interact with the world and your understanding of your own responsibilities to that world. I saw a headline recently. A new study showing that smart kids are being held back in their education. It's long been an idea by many that it's kind of ridiculous. And I understand this. Kind of ridiculous that we put all 9-year-olds in the same class and all 10-year-olds in the same class. That's the way we organize it. That you should advance at your own pace and you should be at whatever level you're the most comfortable and you could more self-guided education. Now, I totally understand that school of thought, and to a great extent, I agree with it. But there's one element missing, and this might sound a little controversial, but I've thought about this for years, since my days way back getting my own education degree. And I taught for a while. And I had to talk to parents about this. I like when smart kids in the class take leadership roles and help to teach the other kids. Now, this is not a popular opinion. In my experience, I found it to be very beneficial to everyone involved. If maybe you're ahead of things and you get it, and yeah, maybe we're ignoring you a little bit because we have to give more attention to the other kids. If you can be in a position as a student to teach what you know to the kids who really need a little extra help, that's not just a one-way transaction at all. No. The teaching student, the smart kid, gets great benefit from that. And obviously, the student who needs help gets help. Everyone benefits. So I know that maybe you were one of the smart kids. And you had to do group projects and you had to do all the work and the other ones, you know that whole story. And you still resent it. Maybe you're the parent of that smart kid who feels like they're being ignored and their potential isn't being explored. I mean, I hear you. I definitely hear you. I understand. But I just bring this up because it's missing from this idea. Yeah, they did a study. Smart kids are being ignored largely. And they could do a lot more than they're asked to do. But they just kind of sit around and wait for everybody else to catch up. And the 10-year-olds move on when they turn 11, and then again when they move 12, and they all go together. And yeah, I can see how that's a problem. And research is bearing it out. And yeah, we should do something about it. So I'm not arguing with that. Nope, I'm not arguing. But I am just pointing out the one missing element. Kids teaching kids, students teaching students, is a really, really good idea. It helps everyone. And it's not only when one kid shows leadership because they have abilities that the others don't, that's great. Especially if everyone can accept each other in their various roles, because it's happening all the time. Because there's also the kid in class who's the social leader. They've got people skills. And they're cracking the jokes, and they're starting the games, and they're leading the way out to the playground. Something that maybe the math genius, maybe skills that she doesn't have. So I don't want to say every kid, but many kids in that classroom can find their niche, can find their little element of expertise or their strength, and they can be leaders. And they can be seen as leaders. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. One kid is the artist. One kid is the musician. One kid is the math genius. Another kid excels at inventing games out on the playground. Now we're building a community. And now we're teaching kids what to take into the so-called real world when they join it. And while you're doing that, You teach every damn kid in your classroom from pre-K through college, critical thinking, the logical fallacies, how to think about the world. Not what to think, but how to think. Now we got something going here. Which, I know I'm out of time, but I just have to reiterate one more time. Stop with the you don't have to go to college thing. So many people are talking about jumping on a bandwagon. So many people are jumping on this bandwagon. Oh, you can make so much more money if you go to trade school or you become a carpenter or this, do an apprenticeship. Everybody needs laborers. There's all the, it's so popular. You can't turn around without seeing some feature on the news or another article on social media. But listen, that's all fine. It's all fine. But there is something to be said. In fact, there is everything to be said for a good liberal education as described by our new friend, philosophy professor Peter Boland. Critical thinking, evidence-based truth-seeking, global awareness, empathy, curiosity, and humility. You're not going to get any of those from carpenter school. Carpenter school is great. Be a carpenter. What's cooler than being a carpenter? Nothing. But these skills and values are they're crucially important. Without them, we're just done for. Because, half the people who went to the damn January 6th insurrection were professionals. They owned their own plumbing outfit, or they had a real estate business. They all had these little specialties. Most of them were pretty successful people who could take several days off and fly out to Washington to break into the Capitol. A lot of them were damn successful people. But in this very myopic, specific bubble kind of a way. They knew their business. They were smart enough to be successful in their business. But did they really have a decent liberal arts education? Did they really understand the Constitution they claimed they were fighting for? Do they understand the basics of democracy? Did they come to their decisions through evidence-based truth-seeking, through global awareness, through empathy, curiosity, humility? That's the exact opposite of the deplorables. So please join me in being an advocate for liberal arts and humanities at all levels. And join me in advocating for a 2 or 4 year college experience for everyone. Sure, go ahead, be an electrician. Be whatever you want. It's great. But if we want to live together in this world, and if we want to survive on the planet, quite literally, and if we're lucky enough to do that, if we want to live in a democracy, and if we want to progress, as we've gotten sort of spoiled about, we feel like we can progress as a nation, our freedoms and justice on the rise as we progress. If we want all that, we can't be dummies about it. We just can't. It won't work. It's a losing formula. All right. There it is. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.